So I wanted to start off with a bit of a story. It's one of my favorite stories from the Pali Canon. And it starts off at a place called Uruvela. And it's at the time of the Buddha. And there is a teacher living there. He is one of the Jatalas, who are the matted hair ascetics. And he is a fire worshipper. Now, he must have been quite a famous teacher because it is said that he had 500 disciples. And these matted hair ascetics worshipped this particular fire-spitting serpent. Yeah? So there's a fire-spitting serpent sitting in a chamber, and they worship this fire-spitting serpent. And then along comes the Buddha, and what he wants to do is that he asks Kassapa, Uruvela Kassapa, if he could spend a night in this chamber with a fire-spitting serpent. So Kassapa is slightly bemused, but he says, well, yes, go ahead, if you dare. So the Buddha enters the chamber, he sits down, and he, I imagine, he sort of arranges a seat for himself and starts to meditate. And of course, this fire-spitting serpent gets very, very angry. First there is smoke, then there is venom, and then there is fire. And from the outside, I imagine Uruvela Kassapa just seeing the chamber sort of light up, and then sort of like get licks of flames coming out. And the chamber is all aglow. And Kassapa thinks to himself, well, that's the end of that monk. But the next day, the Buddha emerges from the chamber, holding his begging bowl with a little snake curled up inside. And Kassapa thinks to himself, well, this monk is indeed powerful, but he's not an enlightened master like me. Mm-hmm. So the Buddha then goes off to a forest grove very, very close to where Kassapa and his 500 disciples are. And in the evening, the Buddha is visited by devas, by spirits. And the Buddha proceeds to teach these spirits. He teaches them the Dharma. And the devas are so happy that they illuminate the forest grove with lights. And Kassapa sees this from the distance. What he sees is this forest grove lit up with an unearthly glow. And the next day, Kassapa goes to the Buddha reappears, and Kassapa says to him, well, what happened? And the Buddha says to Kassapa, well, I was teaching the devas, and the 4 great kings appeared, and they lit up the forest grove. And Kassapa thinks to himself, this monk is indeed a powerful master, but he's not enlightened like me. Now, the next thing that happens is that Kassapa, it's a festival day. And it's a festival day where the fire worshippers come together, and they are about to, Kassapa's hopeful that they would give him lots and lots of offerings, fine foods, silks, jewels. And he thinks to himself, I hope this monk will not stay around, because if he continues to display his marvels and his powers, the people's faith in him will increase, and their faith in me will decrease. And the Buddha, knowing his mind, decides that he will take himself off. So he goes away. After the festival, after all the disciples have made their offerings to Kassapa, the Buddha comes back. And Kassapa says, oh, well, where did you go? And the Buddha says, well, I knew that you thought that if I stay around, you were worried that your disciples' faith in me will increase and their faith in you will decrease. So I went away. And again, Kassapa thinks to himself, this monk is indeed powerful, but he's not an enlightened master like me. So this goes on for quite a while. Poor Kassapa, every time the Buddha displays a marvel, every time the Buddha, displays his power, his different cities, his different sort of accomplishments, Kassapa again and again thinks, well, this monk is indeed powerful, but he's not an enlightened master like me. After a few hundred of these instances, the Buddha thinks to himself, he needs a sharp shock. So one day he just goes to Kassapa and says, listen, Kassapa, you are not an enlightened master, nor are you on the way to becoming an enlightened master. None of the practices that you do, worshipping fire, will enable you to become an enlightened master, nor even put you on the path to enlightenment. So he just tells him straight. And with these words, Kassapa's self-deception finally crumbles. He falls to his feet and he asks the Buddha to become a disciple. But the Buddha says to him, but you have 500 disciples, you have 500 people who have put their faith in you. And I think you need to have a word with them. You need to tell them that you no longer believe the things that you were espousing, the practices that you were espousing, and let them choose. Let them be free to choose what they follow. So Kassapa goes to his disciples, and guess what? They said something along the lines of, well, we've noticed, and we were just waiting for you to notice. Okay. So the story goes on, and there are other people who, Kassapa's got two other brothers who, have the same sort of response to the Buddha. But I'll leave the story there, because what I most wanted to draw out from the story is that most of the time, most of us are kind of like Kassapa. We don't really have a clear conception of the goal in our life, nor really any idea of how to get there, nor are we able to put those practices, to put a path in place to attain those goals. Or sometimes we might have quite a clear goal in mind, but these goals are a bit too small for us. They're too small to contain all of us. If career is your goal, you might attain the position that you want. If family is your goal, you might have a family. And then what? Yeah? And then what? So on these retreats, I come very often, and I often think about myself the first time I came on the winter retreat. And when we were on the team retreat this year, I was telling a little bit of my life story and how I turned up on the winter retreat. Kind of, in a way, I wasn't particularly suffering. I was a little bit lonely perhaps, and I don't know, probably drinking a little bit too much. But life wasn't actually bad. But I didn't really have a sense of what my life could be. So I was working in the city then, and I suppose I was sort of laughing in the team retreat and just said that, well, the biggest ambition, the biggest sort of goal I could imagine for myself at that point was to become a managing director and then have a vineyard somewhere. Yeah. But I met people on this retreat who just seemed to embody something completely different. And fortunately for me, I also met somebody who kind of did the exact same job that I did and had left. And he had left and he was working for a charity instead. And suddenly I just realized that, I don't have to have that life. I don't have to have those goals. There's life after investment banking. So David Foster Wallace puts it, and this is quite a long quote, but it's so beautiful, I want to read it out to you. There is no such thing as not worshipping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. If you worship money and things, if they are what you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough, never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally grieve you. Worship power, you will end up feeling weak and afraid. And you will need ever more power and others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they are evil or sinful. It is that they're unconscious. They are our default setting. So I thought one of the things that you might want to think about in the silence is, what do you worship really? What is it at the center of your life? What is it at the center of your mandala? What thing of value have you been sacrificing your time and your energy to this year? I think it is really, really worth reflecting on, because if we are to take responsibility for our lives, that's a question that we need to answer. Because how we live our days is how we live our lives. And it's hard. I was thinking it's hard in modern life to not be seduced into worshipping things that aren't of particular value. I was thinking that one of the things I really, really like doing, one of my favorite activities, is going shopping. Not that I have very, very much money to go shopping with these days, but I think there's something still sensuous and so enjoyable about looking at things that are beautiful. Actually, I think it's okay to tell you this. Manas and I, when we were preparing for the winter retreat, one of the things that we did was we went to Westfield. It was a great afternoon together. I have a video montage of Manas trying on different jackets and hats. It's great. It's on the LBC Instagram if you want. I think it is anyway. It's on my Instagram for sure. But yeah, so some of the shops that I go into, some of them are kind of really, really built like temples. There's the temple to Athleisure, Lululemon, very, very nice, beautiful temple. There's the Cathedral of Apple. Has anyone been to the Apple store in Covent Garden recently? It's full of natural light, 3-story high ceilings. There's even a few trees in the middle. And it really, really feels like a cathedral with pews and ritual objects that you can handle and stroke. Yeah. At the start of the retreat, Manas and I talked quite a bit about relax, engage, and serve. And one of the ways I think about it is that we really, really need to serve our deepest and highest potential. I think this is very, very important, because if we are not serving something that's important in our lives and that's important about life, if we're not serving something beyond sort of like little me, what we end up serving is, I don't know, serving the temple of Lululemon or Apple, but really we serve the me project. Just even if it's just having a very, very refined sense of me, it does not go beyond me. Yeah? So we need to consciously reorientate our lives around something that is worth reorientating our lives around. Do you see what I mean? We need an integrating principle that's big enough, that's really, really worthy of our human potential, that's worthy of our time, our energy. And what that really means is worthy of our lives. So I want to say something about the Buddha's insight, the sort of his enlightenment experience. And I just really want you to bear in mind that what I'm about to say is just a model. It's just a way of conceptualizing an experience that is completely beyond concept. But we need some pointers. So here's one particular way to think about it or to talk about it. So in my mind, a simple formulation of the Buddha's insight is that of Praticca Samutpada, conditioned co-arising, that all things arise on the basis of conditions, and when those conditions cease, the phenomena, the arisen phenomena, will also cease. Everything arises on the basis, on a myriad of conditions. Think about how all of us ended up sitting here in this particular room. That there's the conditions in each of our particular lives, all 129 of us, all sitting here. There's also the conditions for adhisthana to arise. If you sort of think about it, it's really unimaginably wondrous. And it's not causality. It's not causality. I just really want to say that again. Many conditions have to come together to give rise to any particular moment. I think if we really think about it, it is incredible that we're all on retreat together. How precious. So speaking about it like this, I think what can happen is that we think that we can grasp it. We think that we can sort of wrap our minds, if we sort of squint kind of hard and sort of bend our minds a little bit, we think that we can grasp it intellectually. But of course, we don't really grasp it because many of us don't act in accordance with it. I think even causality, which conditionality is not, is very hard to understand. Cause and effect is quite hard to understand, to sort of even put in place in our lives. It's just a very sort of small example of this. I did ask Angela, she said I could tell you this, but she was really quite excited. She said to me the other day, I just realized, Danayutta, it's taken me a whole year, but I just realized that if I stop being a miserable git all the time, and if I try to be a bit happier, my meditations are a bit better. Which I thought was really lovely. It's true. It's true. How we are outside of meditation has an effect on how we are within meditation. And in a way, you could sort of see that that's a little bit more like causality, but so hard to understand. Each of us could probably think about our own particular example of that. Yet, we don't do it. We don't act like that. When you sort of broaden out into conditionality, into more and more factors, it does become harder to grasp. For myself, even though I've been a Buddhist for many years and practicing for many years, and I really love this formulation of the Buddha's insight, I trip over it again and again. One of my best friends, Nyana Ruchi, he says to me this thing, usually before I'm about to lead a retreat, or even during the process of leading a retreat, which really bears out in this retreat, actually. He often says to me, "Relax, Danayutta, nothing is under control." It's a bit like I try my best to spread my hands, but my fingertips just want to go, eh. Control. Okay. Yeah, so our experiences arise again and again, and they just keep arising, independent on conditions. And it's also subtle, because the perceptual situation, like Jnana Vajra was evoking for us last night, was explaining to us last night, even the perceptual situation, mind itself, consciousness itself, is crucial to experience, and that too arises on the basis of conditions. Experience co-arises with awareness, and arises within, and arises within awareness, which itself is not separate. I know that's very, very abstract and heady. Maybe you'll just have to take it to groups tomorrow. And it's not just that we split the field of our awareness into me in here, and world out there. We also ascribe a permanence and a solidity to that experience that it just does not have, yeah? Yeah, not quite understanding that all things are conditioned and arise on the basis of conditions. We don't understand quite how ungraspable, quite how dreamlike, and quite how wonderful life is. And we want to fix, we want to grasp, and all of us probably had a feeling, a sort of feel for this today, that difficulty of sitting with a situation that we're uncomfortable with, and unknown, and in a certain sort of way beyond our control to fix. We're not, our sort of mundane mind is not particularly good at being in uncertainty. So from the Buddha's perspective, all phenomena is in flux all the time. It's not separate, and it's completely interconnected. It's difficult for us to see this because we're part of it. But when we can hang looser to experience, when we can hang looser to the clinging, what arises is love. Yeah? If we see that things arise on the basis of conditions, and we stop making that mistake, or at least see that we make that mistake, that we're clinging to things as if they're solid and real, if we're able to sort of realize just for a moment that these things are just momentary arisings, these moments just arise and come up and they disappear, if we're able to let go of always and never, if we're able to let go of he's like this, she's like that, I'm the sort of person I am, things are how they are and always will be like that. If we can recognize this mistake in ourselves and in other people, it becomes obvious that love is the answer. Actually, I'm not even sure that love and answer are quite the right words in that last sentence. They don't quite do it justice. Maybe the only word that works is obviously. Let's try to explain it in a different way. So a couple of years ago, I was leading a retreat. It was at the end of the lockdowns, and it was one of the first full retreats that we ran at our retreat center, Vajrasana. And it was a lovely, lovely retreat. On the first evening, it was a retreat that was full of laughter and enjoyment. On the first evening, where we got everyone to stand up and introduce themselves, all the retreatants did, the team did as well, and somebody stood up and he said, because we had asked them, say your name and say whether you've been on retreat before. And this man stood up and he said, hi, my name is, Chris. Hi, my name is Chris. And this is my second time on retreat, so if you got any questions, just ask me. And we were off, that was what the retreat was like. It was full of joy, full of laughter, and also really deep. We spent a lot of time just doing not very much at all, really exploring the life of the Buddha. And then at the end of the retreat, something quite interesting happened for me. It's been a couple of years and I'm still trying to understand this experience, trying to integrate this experience. What happened was that I went back to London, and it's as if suddenly, for about 6 weeks or so, I just was not afraid of people. I'm not talking about, like sort of quite obvious fear. I am talking about that too. But that slight withdrawing that we do all the time, that it's just very, very unconscious, that this sense of like, oh, you're not me, basically. That slight withdrawing that we do just wasn't there. And it lasted for quite a while. I remember sitting on the central line. So this was a summer retreat, so it was sometime at the end of August. And it was hot, the central line's very, very hot in summer. It was very, very noisy and dirty. And I was sitting with my friend who's also a Buddhist, and she was just saying how unpleasant it was. And she's like, I was trying to talk about it in a slightly spiritual way. I'm just having a lot of arising of unpleasant feeling sensation. And then she turned to me and said, what are you thinking about? And I found myself saying, I'm just looking at people in this carriage and just thinking that they could all be Buddhas. And it wasn't sentimental. Yeah, it wasn't sentimental. It was as if we were completely connected through our potential to grow, our potential to be perfectly awake. And there was tenderness. So I think that's what I mean, that like love isn't quite the right word. Talking to Nyana Vacha about it today, we were both wondering whether it's because that kind of love isn't personal. It's not towards an individual. It's as if there's a field of love, and then whatever arises within it gets love. And if there's nobody there, there's just love. Yeah? So I wanted to tell you about this experience. And also just to say that these experiences, it is to do with what we then do with it. Yeah, it is to do with whether or not we can live from these experiences, whether they really change us, whether we're able to integrate these experiences into our lives. I think for me, what it's done is that it's given me confidence. It's given me confidence, like a clearer sense of what I need to be doing if I want to make progress, and a clearer idea of what the goal might look like from the inside. So the top of my list for conditions for Danayutta to flourish is laughter, enjoyment, doing a lot of nothing, preferably lying back on grass and looking at sky in August, a healthy dose of meditation, and robust Dharma discussions. I think for me, hearing the Dharma, being inspired by the Dharma is very, very important. A community, people to practice with, the people to reflect me back, people to challenge me, people to inspire me. And also a kind of falling in love with all beings. I think that's kind of what happened at the end of the pandemic, that suddenly we could be with other people, and there was a bit of like a falling in love. Yeah. Even if it was a bit at the mundane level, it sort of helped bring about a different kind of love. Okay. So that's wisdom and love. I think there is something else I wanted to say, which is about freedom. The other thing that we need is the freedom to make a choice. So we need to reflect on what we really, really want to do with our lives. This is very important, I think, and to make a real choice. We need to feel free to say no, to be able to say yes fully. And having made that choice, we also need practices that will integrate us, sort of gather all our energies so that we can move towards our goals, so that we can move towards what we most value in life. And I think sometimes we can get a little bit confused about freedom. The freedom that I'm trying to evoke is a mental state. So there's a story from the canon which I've been exploring over the last year, and I have explored it in study seminars with some people in this room. We did a kind of sub-25 women's seminar on this particular story. And it's the Mahanama Sutta. So I won't tell you what Buddha actually teaches in this sutta, but I'll just sort of tell you the preamble, which is that not all of the Buddha's disciples followed him into the homeless life. Not all of them became monks. Not all of them became wandering renunciants. Some of them had responsibilities. Some of them had, they were lay disciples. They were people of the world, in the world. And one of them, his name was Mahanama, and it sounds like Mahanama was quite a rich man. And probably in those days, if you're quite a rich person, if you're a bit of a merchant, you probably have many, many, many people depending on you. Not just your immediate family, which can be quite big if you've got many wives, but also your extended family depends on you. So I imagine Mahanama to be a man of many responsibilities, many household responsibilities. And the Buddha, he was a follower of the Buddha and a kind of patron. So the Buddha, he invited the Buddha to stay with him over the rains retreats, over the monsoons, where it's very, very difficult to travel. So the Buddha would stop and stay in one place, and he would teach the people in that place. And it was the end of the rains retreat when the Buddha was about to leave. And Mahanama had this thought, oh, I better go and ask him for some Dharma teaching, very, very specific Dharma teaching. And what Mahanama asked the Buddha was, where should I dwell? Those were his words, where should I dwell? And obviously, he's not talking about like actual living place. He is talking about where should my mind dwell? Yeah. So I think it's an important question. It's an important question for us. Where is it that we want our minds to dwell? Which dwelling places are worthy of being in? Because most of us won't be on retreat all the time. Most of us won't be able to be around our Dharma teachers all the time. Even if you live in a Buddhist community, at some point your teachers, won't be around anymore. Or you might go off and pioneer the Dharma somewhere where, you're far away from your teachers. And that's great. It's great that most of us are in the world because the Dharma needs to be in the world. We need Dharma practitioners in the world. But what it means is that we need to take our Dharma practice with us. So in our society, we have a lot of external freedom. Probably too much freedom. Because, and when you have too much external freedom, it kind of leads to a tyranny of choice. There's so much choice, and how do you choose? So what we need is a corresponding emphasis on awareness. Awareness and courage, I think, to make the right choice. If we have more inner freedom, if we've got more sort of robustness of mind, then we can choose creatively. We can choose wisely. Because if we don't, what actually happens is that we drift. We sort of fall prey to, habit and circumstance, sort of go along with other people's ideas of what life should be. I used to work for Nyanavacha. I don't anymore. But one of the things that he said that really affected me when I was working at the London Buddhist Center and he was chair was that it's very, very hard for us as worldlings to rise above our context. That is, to rise above the situation that we find ourselves in. It is very hard, and it's true, it is very hard. We kind of just conform to the people around us. When we're on retreat, it's so easy to practice, isn't it? Because everyone else is practicing. I don't know about you, but I just felt like there was so much momentum today, and it was easy. It was as if there was wind in my sails. It's easy to be kind here. It's easy to smile at people. It's easy to love one another. But I just sort of I was thinking about it today, like if you put me back into the city, if you put me back into an investment bank, I like to think that I could probably not be ultra demanding about every single detail. But I probably, after a few months, a few years, might get a bit sweary. I'll swear a bit more. And certainly I will have more money to satisfy my cravings. Maybe I will have update my iPhone a bit more frequently or something. But I think the thing that I would fear most for myself is that my heart would harden, because I think that's what I see around me when I do go into the city, when I do go into the financial districts. I see hardened hearts and hard faces. And I fear becoming like that. Okay. But if we are to be in the world, we really, really need to gather resources. We need to gather resources through ethics, through meditation, through wisdom. We need to cultivate awareness, cultivate love, refine our aesthetic sense, our aesthetic moral sense. So it's not so much about doing what is right, but to do what is beautiful. Do what is beautiful. That's what ethics really means. We also need to gather our resources so that we can be more resilient in the face of adversity. We need to choose wisely, and we need to be able to rise above our context. And not just rise above our context, I think. We need to be able to create good context for other beings. That's what the world really needs us to be doing, to create good context for others. So I think my hope for all of you is that you find that freedom and that you have the courage to choose, to make a real choice to flourish. One way I've been thinking about it recently is to become a person of intrinsic value, that people want to be around. And that may be within our movement, this retreat is one way to try out practicing with the Triratna Buddhist community. It's a very, very good way to try it out. And if that's what you want to do, the Dharma path is wide open to you. If you found something here, it's an open invitation to train in our tradition, train in with us. But it might not be suitable for everyone, and that's absolutely okay. But please make a choice. The world needs us to choose to be better, to be more. So, let me just have a moment to think. So, all the Buddhas we've explored are ways into the enlightened mind. And we have the historical Buddha that the archetypes flow from. And I think it's really, really important, the historical Buddha, because he was a person just like us. He was human just like us. Awakening is human potential. It's not about, and it's not just about an archetype out there that we can sort of pay homage to, devote ourselves to. It is a possibility for all of us in this life. Progress is possible, awakening is possible. The love and the wisdom of the Buddhas are active forces in the world that we can align ourselves to. At the ultimate level is a kind of patterning in the world that wants to act through us. Yeah? So we've had a talk, we've had lots and lots of talks about different kinds of wisdoms. Over the course of the retreat, we've taught, I don't know, in a certain sort of way, like about Buddhist metaphysics, certainly in the puja workshop. Yesterday we explored the nature of consciousness, and nature of awareness, and nature of mind. But I think what it comes down to me personally as a practitioner is something much, much more simple. It's much, much more simple. It's about living well and dying well and having the breadth and depth of mind to do that. So I want to finish with a story that's full of meaning and symbolism for me. I was going to tell you quite a lot about why, but maybe I'll just let the story stand on its own. There's really two stories. The Buddha had a chief disciple called Sariputta. And he loved Sariputta. I think he loved Sariputta very, very much. Sariputta was a spiritual genius and had this tremendous intellect, like the Buddha. But his kind of intellect was one that was very, very nerdy. It was extremely analytical. He had a very, very sort of detailed mind. And it's thanks to Sariputta that a lot of the kind of sort of more technical aspects of Buddhism and meditation and the Dharma have come about. Raja mentioned the Yogacara tradition last night, and I don't think, probably without Sariputta, who knows, maybe there were other nerds in the Buddhist Sangha, but maybe without Sariputta, the Yogacara might not have come about. So you have this meeting of two massive intellects, and the Buddha really loves Sariputta. There's this little kind of tiny little sutta buried in the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's in the young devas section, the young spirits section. And it starts off with the Buddha asking his attendant Ananda, "Ananda, do you approve of Sariputta?" And Ananda says, "Who would not approve of Sariputta unless he was foolish, full of hatred, and mentally deranged?" And then Ananda just, proceeds to really, really draw out Sariputta's different good qualities. And the Buddha is so delighted and pleased, he repeats Ananda's rejoicings, repeats all the good qualities of Sariputta. And this young deva, this young spirit passing through the forest grove at that point, Susima, with his 500, this retinue of 500 other young devas, overhear the Buddha's rejoicing in Sariputta and light up the forest grove. In the forest grove, in the sutta, in the story, it describes all the different colors this forest grove is lit up. And I just find it so interesting that they decided to record that story. Like, why? Why did they decide to record that story? And I think it's because they just wanted us to know that the Buddha loved Sariputta, and the Buddha rejoiced in Sariputta. In fact, he loved many, many of his disciples, not just Sariputta. So the final story I want to tell you is about Sariputta's death. At some point, Sariputta knew he was going to die, and that he was going to die before the Buddha. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to go and see his mother, and to try to help his mother gain liberation. His mother was, it sounds like his mother was quite a difficult woman, basically. Whenever he turned up at her village, she was quite a wealthy woman. And she would feed him and feed his retinue of monks, but she would also harangue him and sort of insult him as he walked through the streets begging for food. So quite a difficult mother. But Sariputta wanted to help her gain liberation before he died. So he went to the Buddha and said, I am going to die. And if it's all the same with you, I would like to go and see my mother. And the Buddha neither said yes or no. He didn't say don't go. He didn't say stay. And he didn't say you should go or you should not go. What he said was, will you preach the Dharma one last time to this assembly of monks? So Sariputta did. He gave a rousing Dharma talk. And then at the end of his Dharma talk, he falls to his knees, he wraps his arms around the Buddha's legs, and he asks the Buddha for forgiveness. And the Buddha says, you have not done any wrong by me. You have not done any wrong by me. And Sariputta says his final goodbye, and he walks backwards away from the Buddha, never turning his back to the Buddha. A very, very long way. And the Buddha says to his attendants, go with your brother. And Sariputta keeps walking back and back. So it's simple, really.